evening and welcome to UCSD Conversations. I'm Mary Walshock, Associate Vice Chancellor for Public Programs at the University of California, San Diego. It is my pleasure to introduce you to some of our faculty and their cutting-edge research. Please join us for an enlightening evening of conversation. Tonight we continue to celebrate UCSD's 40th birthday with a look at the memory wall. And we'll learn about the university's energy generation and conservation efforts. But first, Muir College Provost Patrick Ledden in conversation with Larry Smarr, Director of the new California Institute for Telecommunications and Information Technology here at UCSD.
Thank you, Mary. My guest today is Professor Larry Smarr of the UCSD Department of Computer Science. Professor Smarr is also the director of a new multidisciplinary research institute called the California Institute on Telecommunications and Information Technology. It's been funded by the state to help develop California's technology in this coming century. Larry, thank you for being here.
Great to be here.
You've done a lot of things in your life. You started out as a physicist. Then you were one of the key people in developing the Supercomputer Center, the National Center for Supercomputing Applications at the University of Illinois. Were one of the instrumental folk in developing web browsers and after Al Gore invented the internet. And now you're here working in this. Is that a natural progression of interests?
Well, I think so. The thing that people sometimes don't realize is how critical research universities are in the development of new ideas and technology. You go back to where the internet came from. It was actually people that were funded by DARPA in the 70s developed these technologies.
It was called the DARPANET, wasn't it?
ARPANET, yeah. And then that technology base was used by the National Science Foundation in 1985 when it had just created the new supercomputer centers, including the one here at San Diego, to hook them together with that technology. And that became the NSFNet backbone. That hooked up all the universities, and then that gradually was commercialized in the 90s into today's global internet. You mentioned the web browsers. Again, we had brilliant undergraduates like Mark Andreessen in computer science and Eric Bina, who was a graduate student in computer science, working at our center of the NCSA, and figuring out how could we make a graphical web browser that would make it easier for people to show images and so forth. And that led to NCSA Mosaic, and several million people used it worldwide before Netscape came from Mark and the others leaving to form that company. Internet Explorer was licensed that. So the federal government's long-term basic research funding for high-risk, over-the-horizon, follow-your-nose kind of research is, to me, why this country has such a competitive lead on the rest of the world. There's no other program like it anywhere in the world.
It's a long tradition. I think it goes back to the land-grant universities. I grew up in the Midwest, and the land-grant universities were responsible for scientific agriculture, still are in many ways.
You're absolutely right on, and I think a lot of people have forgotten that those are our roots.
That's the tradition, yeah.
The citizens of the state parted with their hard-earned money 120 years ago, when it really was hard-earned.
It was, right.
Because they believed that the research we did would lead to a more productive economy, which at that time was agriculture, or the engineering faculty would help with the rising American manufacturing sector. They knew that their kids had to have more than an 8th grade education, so they needed that college education, and they understood that service, the working of the university faculty with the community, was going to be critical to transfer that technology.
The old extension services,
right.
The agricultural extension services, which have provided that for 100 years and more. Yeah.
And so I think that Governor Gray Davis's institutes are really just a back to the future, a reinvention of this, our fundamental values from our roots.
Yeah. But and the universities play a key role there. I mean, this idea that the universities have to do this, the blue sky research, right? That where there isn't an immediate payoff. We have to be able to be risk takers. You have to be able to devote time and energy when there isn't necessarily a payoff that a private corporation really can't do. But then the next step is to transfer it. I mean, both things are essential. Is that a fair remark?
If you don't have new ideas,
Yeah,
You
you
can't
dry up.
transfer them.
You dry up, yeah.
And so, but I think that we have to constantly be on the lookout to protect and develop these two different functions.
Yes, absolutely.
Sometimes people just say, well, you know, research, somebody else will do it. Well, who else is going to do it but the universities? The companies nowadays can't do it. They've got quarter profits to meet.
We also have, excuse me, this kind of research also requires a diversity of intellectual interest too, that no individual company is likely to support. Is that
Absolutely right. And in fact, you know, tonight I'm giving a lecture on the intersection of science and technology and the arts. And I've seen many ideas come from the arts that actually have made it possible for scientists to actually do things they had no idea how to do because they weren't trained in the visual or acoustic arts.
Sure. Where in fact the artists coming in from a very different perspective really add to the mix.
Very much so.
No, and a company is not likely to do that. That's what we do well.
That's correct.
That's what universities do. It's also the case that the new society, the society that we're moving into in this century, is confronted by a host of really complex problems. But the new technology has to confront those problems, I think, of pollution, traffic.
If we don't have something new come along,
It's going to be tough.
It's going to get really bad.
Yep.
Fortunately, there are a whole brand new set of technologies on the horizon that most people probably are not aware of yet, that our institute is going to focus on. The wireless extension of the internet. Right now, to get to the internet, it's sort of like radio in the 30s. You remember these pictures where people were huddled around this big, you know, and that's how they heard Franklin Roosevelt give the...
Absolutely. Fireside talks.
That's
Absolutely.
it. Well, isn't that what we do today to get to the internet?
Sure.
We huddle around little machines in our homes or our office and look through them into the... That is going to be looked on as primitive as the 1930s radio, because with this wireless internet, we'll be able to dial into the channels of the web anywhere, anytime. But this means that it won't just be us. That means our cars will be online and they can talk to each other. So my car will know where all the other cars are, where there's traffic jams, where there aren't, and how to reroute to avoid those using, say, the global positioning satellites. The same thing goes with the environment. You know, here in San Diego, we have a very unusual situation in that it rains only for a few weeks out of the year.
Yes.
Well, if you think about it, what that means is that take something like the watershed that flows into the bay, and that accumulates a whole year's worth of residue, before it gets washed in with these rains we're experiencing,
all kinds of things.
Heavy metals, bacteria, and everything else. Well, it seems obvious that if we could put detectors in the storm drains all over San Diego County, and there was a way to get that information back somehow to an analysis facility, we could find where the, say, top third this year of the pollution problem is coming from. The trouble is right now, what are you going to do? Put fiber optics through the storm drains or something? It doesn't make much sense.
No, right.
But if you have little wireless transmitters that are on these little tiny devices that micro and then nano technology is going to make possible in the way of sensors, you could imagine such a ecological network to inform us about the state of our environment.
So then the point would be, once you knew that, you might be able to go upstream and control the sources of this stuff, so in the future it doesn't happen. Sort of
if there's a point source of pollution, it might cost tens of thousands of dollars to build something around it or to do something. But by the time it goes down the rivers, into the bay, out into the ocean, it becomes a $100 million problem.
Of course, the cleanup is wildly more complicated.
Right, and so it's stitch in time saves nine. So it's common sense, really, that we're talking about.
But this is being made possible, at least in part, by the fact that we can miniaturize. It reduces power requirements, for example.
You're exactly right. It can't be done if each of these sensors is going to cost $50,000 and we have to go and replace the batteries every 2 weeks.
Yeah, or we'll hire it up or do whatever. Yeah,
right. So the same magic that we've seen in Moore's Law with the PCs, that every year they get faster and cheaper for the same computing power, once we get the sensors into silicon and we can begin to integrate, say, DNA arrays that can detect different kinds of bacteria or little chemistry labs, if you like, miniaturized down into silicon, then as the thing shrinks, it gets cheaper, just like for computers.
Cheaper and easier.
Yep.
I mean, in the
And
sense
lower
that
power.
lower power, that you don't have to change the batteries all the time. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and then the other thing, of course, is that it's sort of cute once you think about it. Imagine you're going to deploy 1,000 of these sensors. Well, you can imagine that the sensors only need enough battery power to get to the next one. And they can sort of form an ad hoc little network among themselves, and then maybe only 1 in 10 or 1 in 50 of them is a higher power
Has to have
one.
power enough to
And
send
then,
it up to the...
Well, it can go to the next level. And then at a certain point, finally, ET calls home, and the signal finally goes to the internet.
Oh, that's one of the problems I was concerned about. I mean, even with the best of batteries and the lowest of power things, you still, that's a strain, right, to have to send it very far. But if you only send it incrementally, then you can collect a lot of information, sort of real time, I mean, and only need those powerful sources scattered.
Right, and the same thing goes with cars. You know, if all they have to do is talk to the next car or to the
something along the
next
road,
telephone pole or something, then they don't have to have a battery and transmitter powerful enough to call all the way to some central location. So this all sounds great, right? But it's a research agenda. That is, what you have to do is bring people that don't currently work together but are probably already here at our university, or in this case, Irvine is one of our candidates, and one of our partners, and we're working with SDSU and others around here to say, well, let's get some computer scientists and some electrical engineers and some biologists and some chemists, and let's imagine a several-year research project to prototype these. Let's work with the community to find some place to deploy them in a test environment. Let's work the bugs out. Then we can deploy more. And by that time, of course, every year as we go on, it gets cheaper, right?
Of course.
And more reasonable for large-scale deployment.
But even that process is a research issue.
Yes.
I mean, I sort of have a feeling that as things increase in complexity, they really increase in complexity. I mean, you have software problems and maintenance problems. But then that's part of the research agenda.
And you have social and political
well, that's the next
and legal
step.
problems.
Of course.
And so one of the things that we're very keen on is, in our institute, is we're bringing in policy people and people from social sciences, people who study ethical issues and so forth. And we hope very much, as this TV show is a good example of starting a conversation with the broader community, because my feeling is this is not something technology can solve. It's something our society can solve if we work together, and technology is just one of those tools. But it has to be trusted. You know, say everybody has to be in from the start.
Yes, of course. Of course.
You know, we can't come from the university and say, we're going to solve this for you.
Guys. Right.
That doesn't work.
No. It takes time. I mean, there's an interaction that they have to buy in. I mean, that the society.
Well, you know, it goes back to your very deep comment about the land-grant universities. You know, there it took many, many decades to develop that trust, that bond between the farmers, the people in the university, the emerging commercial concerns, and so forth. And I don't think we can fool ourselves that this is going to be a quick fix.
No.
But the governor has, at least here in Southern California, given us a new opportunity to begin that dialogue.
Yeah. Now, one of the things which it was, I think, also characteristic of the land grant operation, probably not quite as specifically as I'm about to say we're going to do here, but part of the Cal IT Squared, your institute is fondly called by its friends, is a strong corporate participation. That somehow the idea of when we find something that works, of transferring that out into the commercial sector for development and bringing it into the actual world of the community. Let's talk about that a little bit. That's not an easy interaction necessarily.
Well, it's at least complex.
Okay, that's a good word.
And there are changing attitudes about conflict of interest, intellectual property, and so forth. But I'll say this, the governor tapped into some very productive, unused resources. When he said, I will put down the money for the buildings and the laboratories and so forth if you can go out and convince people that your vision is so compelling that we can get $2 added to the table
for every dollar.
The private sector from every dollar that I put on the table. Well, most people thought this was just crazy. You know, we couldn't possibly do this. But as we began to bring people together from the university sector in novel ways, you know, getting Irvine faculty to work with San Diego faculty, getting computer scientists to work with artists, bring in engineers and working with chemists. This vision was so compelling that for the $100 million the governor put down, we had $140 million declared from industry over those 4 years, and another $60 million from individuals and foundations and the campuses.
That's spectacular.
That's before we go to the federal government. Wow. So California is really making a whole new model here for how to support research, namely that our state is determining what's important for our future.
Right.
We're getting our government, our universities, and our private folks coming together to define that research agenda. And then for the further out high-risk research, we'll go to Washington to get grants.
Sure,
but
NSF or whoever.
We're setting our own agenda in the state, and I think that's what I like about this. It's
that's interesting.
Very novel approach.
It's going to serve the citizens, at least the hope will be that it will serve the citizens as previous developments have served the citizens, right?
We want to
strong
focus,
economy, strong
we're
economy.
focusing as much on improving the quality of life for the citizens of California as we are on the economy, which is only one component of that. We can't have growth here in Southern California at the expense of the environment. After all,
people won't come here.
Many of us came here to live because of the environment.
Because it's so wonderful. Yes, absolutely.
And so it's not an either or, it's a bringing together, as I say, of people who have common interests. Now, what I've found is that the industry, people worry about what's the industry taking out of the university. Well, let's look at the fact that they're putting into the university $140 million. I mean, this is like $12 million to attract the very best students to the university over the next 4 years in fellowships. It's money for endowed professorships to be able to hire the very best faculty from around the country to bring here to these campuses.
To equip labs, to do all sorts of things.
Fantastic equipment donations and so forth. So I've never seen such a wonderfully future-oriented approach by industry as I've seen in the response here.
And that's going to be at least a 4-year relationship and almost surely beyond that.
Right.
Once we establish it, it's not going to change.
Very much so, and the governor has said that his intention is to set up a permanent operating budget for the institute, and we think once that happens, the industry will re-up.
Sure, because they will by 4 years surely have understood how powerful this is for them as well. And for the society. I like this notion that this is not, although economic development is obviously an important part of it, all right, but it's also to maintain the quality of life here in terms of pollution and traffic control. And we haven't even talked about biomedicine, but everything you're talking about, sensors, if it applies to traffic, it probably applies to our bodies.
Very much so. And if you're a person, for instance, that is high risk for heart attack, wouldn't it be nice if you had a little sensor measuring your heartbeat that had enough intelligence that it could tell you to stop climbing the stairs because you're about to go over the threshold and have a heart attack?
That can't be very far away.
No, in fact, you're seeing that sort of thing happen. In fact, I think one of the things that is so exciting about the Institute is how close some really dramatic changes are in our society.
In this sort of change of state. If we were to have this conversation 2010, not quite 10 years from now, if we were to have this conversation, what of those sorts of things would we look back on and say, this happened over that, this was part of that change of state?
Well, if we're successful and we can get the society to come together, we won't have destroyed the beauty of Southern California.
Won't that be a happy thought?
We'll actually be able to get to work in a reasonable time and so forth. Those would be some metrics
breathe the air and all
of success. But further out, maybe in 2010, it might be 2020, you'd be having an interview not with a human being, but with the planetary computer that will be assembled by then, and whose intelligence, although not the same as humans, might be very much comparable. After all, at that point will be, 15 years since a computer beat the world's chess champion.
Yes, yes.
So a lot of what we'll be looking at is as the internet ties together not just Napster that we've been hearing about, which is storage, but all the computing power.
Of course.
Then where will that lead? And as artificial intelligence begins to put learning software into the net, and the net has all of human knowledge and all of the sensors defining our knowledge about what's going on in the world, we're going to have an augmented intelligence as human beings. Our society will have, in a sense, a helper that will gradually get smarter with time.
This raises the prospect of HAL in 2001, but it also raises the very marvelous prospect that we will have help.
That's right.
That the human species will have help in dealing with all of the things which the human species has brought to the planet.
Right, and I think that the important issue is not, is this planetary computer becoming self-aware or not, but rather are we as humans at the moment recognizing the transition that is coming so swiftly, and are we discussing and trying to probe where this world is taking us? Because if we don't, then things...
It'll happen, and maybe in ways we don't want it to happen.
We don't want it to happen to us. We want it to happen in support
for us and with us
of our goals as human beings.
Yes, and how we deal with our planet and how we deal with which means we need philosophers and ethicists and social scientists and all sorts of people to be working with us as we think this through. Because, in fact, there are billions of microprocessors out there.
That's correct.
Right, and when they start to talk to each other, and when we have the ability to have them deal with each other, it's going to be pretty interesting.
Right.
I think, let's say, 10 years from now, I still would like to talk with you. All right, we may do so virtually, I'm not sure. I look forward to having that conversation with you in 2010. My guest today has been Professor Larry Smarr of the UCSD Department of Computer Science. I want to thank Professor Smarr for a far-seeing conversation. Mary, back to you.
Thank you, Pat. Next on Conversations, we'll visit UCSD's Memory Wall with Publications Coordinator Thomas Johnson.
I was sitting in this meeting and there was this big wall behind the person that was talking, and it was just a blank wall, and I thought there needs to be something on the wall. I thought, here's this nice room and no pictures, and then I thought, we need to do a memory wall of UCSD, and we need to have a timeline, and we need pictures, and we need something that showcases UCSD. And so I raised my hand and said that's what I thought would be a good idea, and the next thing I knew, I was chairing the subcommittee for the 40th anniversary. We just started that way and decided we were going to use the Price Center, and there was a perfect area because a lot of people came through here, students, visitors. It's a central point of campus. Martha Hart is a person that I've recently met in the past year, and she's a very artistic person, and I was telling her about this project that I'd be working on, and she said, talk to me, I think I can help you out. And I called Martha on Friday and I said, do you see this looking more like a bulletin board? She's like, no, not really. I didn't know what it was going to turn out to be, so we started scanning photographs and collecting photographs and going over to the Special Collections Library archives and looking at old pictures, and we'd sent an email to all campus staff. We had the alumni office send out an email to all the alumni, and people started sending us things. So we just started collecting as much as we could and started scanning and just putting it in a box, and then we just started working from that. What was so great was Martha had the idea of adding the texture and the dimension and having things pop out. She had in her mind that she knew how we were going to do this, and she's done this before, so she knew how it would all work. So it was great when we started putting the pictures and giving it dimension and life. We wanted to showcase how the campus has grown and how we'd so much building and what the campus looked like before, and La Jolla, and there was great pictures that I'd never seen before of, you know, people standing doing a groundbreaking with shovels, and it would be secretaries and vice chancellors. It was great. It was neat to see that. I don't think anybody had ever researched or found that stuff before, so it was finding these little gems everywhere that would just pop up. We didn't want to just show the building. We wanted to have student life, and there was lots of things that happened here in the 60s with Angela Davis as a student, and Marcuse, and Herb York, and the Chancellor, and all of that, and we wanted to show that. We had so many pictures that were just scanned in boxes, and then we started like putting them by decade, and then what did we want, and there was some things that we had too much of, and then we would look for if we needed more student life, then we'd go look on our box and try and find more student life, or if we needed people that were important to that point of time, we'd look for those. And it was funny because one of my favorite pictures on the 60s panel is Roger Revelle, and he's standing and he's looking up at the camera, and it's such a different shot, and I would have never found that. It was in the general catalog. You know, I scanned it and blew it up, and it looks great. It was just such a cool shot to find. So there was those kinds of things that made it really fun, and then we, you know, started putting it together, and I just let Martha have, you know, the total creativity. I was like her worker bee, you know, making all the pictures for her. So that's how it all sort of happened. Somebody actually came up to me and said, that's in the wrong decade. But he said it was close enough to the end that it didn't matter. So, but we had no way of knowing because people were just sending us things, and we tried our best to get them in the right spot. And you could tell, you know, by hairstyles and clothes and that sort of thing. One of the other cool things is that when we sent out the email to the alumni, someone actually sent us a beanie. And back in the 60s, the students, the freshmen, wore beanies for the first couple weeks, I guess, that they were on campus. So we had it displayed here, and a lot of people had no idea about beanies in UCSD, and it was cool that somebody let us borrow that for a while. What was cool too is that they did yearbooks from each of the graduating classes that we had collected from all of the 5 colleges that they'd saved for us. So Martha and I decided that we wanted to scan a page out of each yearbook and then put that at the top of the panel by the decade, and it gave a real flavor of style and what students looked like, and the changing hairstyles for men went from short to long, and it was interesting, and it was fun to see that up there. The 60s panel wasn't the toughest. I would think it would have been because of finding pictures, but we had so many people send us things, and we got a great aerial shot of the campus that really showed what it looked like, and it's such a big difference from this aerial shot that's at the 90s. One of the funnest things was that there was a San Diego Magazine article done about beauty and brains at UCSD, and it was faculty wives modeling, and there was great pictures that we found that we used of like Herb York's wife, you know, modeling a tweed suit, that sort of thing, and it was just interesting, and that whole caption, beauty and brains by the sea. It was fun to find. The 70s panel, I think I found one of the most interesting pictures was, I guess it was before they had a Sun God Festival. They must have had a spring festival or something, and at Murin they stretched a rope from 2 of the residence halls between in the Muir Commons, and students actually crawled across the rope high above, you know, the ground. So to find that picture of this guy pulling himself across the Muir Quad was really, really surprising. So I don't think that would happen today. There's the picture when the students took over the registrar's office, when there was a demonstration. There's student life types of pictures, so there's a good mix of things going on there. One of the great things about the 80s was it shows the sun god being placed on its little perch up there by Muir, and that was what was cool too, is the Stewart collection had lots and lots of pictures for us to go through of all the art pieces that are on campus, and the sun god is such an identifier to UCSD that it was fun to find that on a crane. There's also a great picture of Ernie Mort and Tom Bond, and Dr. Bond is dressed up like Santa Claus, and Ernie Mort, who was at Revelle, they're surfing. And it's just fun to find those kinds of pictures, and I think people, smile when they see them. The 90s panel, I think, is really cool because there's so many great things that happened in the past 10 years at UCSD. And one of the neatest pictures is of Colleen Sabatini when she gave the commencement address, and it was also the year that President Clinton came and spoke. I chose that picture because it showcases her. He's there sitting with Chancellor Dines, but it was really a great day for her. I mean, it was great to have the president here, but she did such a great job that I chose that picture of her rather than the one of the president. The Did You Know panel happened because we wanted to give people an idea of what happens on campus in a given week, and so we wanted to talk about like how many hamburgers are served from housing and dining to the students, and how much of an impact financially UCSD has into the community. There's just all sorts of things that UCSD does for San Diego, and it's amazing, So we tried to include sort of like fun facts or things that people didn't think about or didn't know about. The unveiling was really, it was just a great day for UCSD. We were celebrating the 40th, and there was cake, and there was it was very festive, and it was a lot of fun. And then there was a special event that afternoon. We invited members of the community to celebrate UCSD. It was just it was a nice day. The feedback we've had has been really very positive, and that's what's been very rewarding to me. I was a student at UCSD. I graduated in 1981, and I've been around campus since 1978 when I transferred here. So the past 40 years I've been here for half of, so it was fun to work on the project, and to do a whole wall or a whole space like this was a big challenge, and it was rewarding because UCSD has grown leaps and bounds in the past 40 years, and we had so many things to choose from and pick, and it does give me a sense of pride and accomplishment to think that I work at such a great place. UCSD is so well respected. People know about us, and just the overall feeling that I get that I got to do this is really rewarding to me.
Finally tonight, Assistant Vice Chancellor Jack Hugg outlines the university's energy generation and conservation efforts with UCSD TV's John Doerr.
Jack Hugg, thank you for joining us on UCSD Conversations. I'd like you to give us a little bit of history and some context about the energy usage, planning, and conservation here on campus. Of course, the media is full of what they have dubbed the California energy crisis, and I'd like to talk about how that's affecting the campus. But first, why don't we get a little bit of background from you about that?
Sure, John. Thank you very much. I'm glad to be here today. The energy efficiency program at UC San Diego began actively developing its strategy back in the mid-'80s. In 1984-85, the campus was engaging in a very substantial expansion program for the university. And at that time, we took a very hard look at what our energy requirements would be for the university. We looked at a strategy that would entail a holistic approach to providing critical energy services to the campus. Our primary concern at that time, as it continues to be today, is to have a reliable supply of energy for the campus, and to achieve that at a reasonable cost. To be able to sustain that over a period of time as a university operates and grows. So in our look at the strategy for the university's energy management program, there are really 4 parts that we looked at. The first part consists of the procurement of the energy itself, or the acquisition of the commodities of electricity and natural gas. 10 years ago, that wasn't a major issue prior to deregulation. We really only had one choice in the marketplace. Today, as you know, there are many more choices for procuring energy. The second part of our energy strategy consisted of the production. Once we acquired the electricity and the natural gas for the campus, how efficiently could we use that? So we took a very careful look at the campus central utility plant and how it was put together, how it operated. The third component consisted of the distribution throughout the campus of the heating and the cooling energies derived from the natural gas and electricity as it came into the central utility plant. The fourth component then became the end user, or the particular building systems, the delivery of heating and cooling to the individual spaces within the building. So our energy efficiency program, what we've called the Total Energy Management for UC San Diego, really began back in the mid-1980s. Today, we continue to work on all 4 components of that strategy, and most recently have developed a very exciting project for cogeneration for the campus.
Could you define cogeneration, please?
Yes, John, cogeneration is the use of a single fuel, in our case it's natural gas, to simultaneously provide both heat energy and electricity. In the case of the university, heat is utilized both for developing high temperature hot water, for heating the campus buildings, and for air conditioning. So we're able to achieve both of those objectives on site and achieve a considerable amount of efficiency and cost savings in the process.
This has been on the books, so to speak, since I believe you mentioned the mid-'80s, and has been under construction for 18 months?
The project has been in the works about 15 months now, and we're anticipating our readiness to operate the plant the 1st of May.
Oh, that soon.
Yes, and this is a project that normally would take 18 months to 2 years to complete.
So you were able to fast-track this project?
Yes, our current construction approach to this is what is called design-build, as compared to a traditional method of having to plan a project, design it, bid the project, and then go through the construction. The design-build process incorporates the design element as the project is being built. So we are designing the project while it is under construction. And our ability to do this is because of having good contractors to work with, local contractors, good supplier sources, and a very qualified physical plant services department and facilities design and construction group to work with.
The cogeneration plant right here runs on natural gas, and we have major gas supply from SDG&E out here in the middle of the street at Gilman and Osler, and we tapped into that one this summer and ran the line up in here. And so this is a new metering station for SDG&E, which meters the gas that we will use for the cogeneration plant. Comes in as a minimum of 150 pounds per square inch, PSI if you will, but the gas turbines require 400 pounds per square inch in order to operate. So we have some gas compressors into this first building right here. So we have 3 gas compressors in there. Well, 2 will run and 1's a spare. And after that, if you kind of look up along the building, that green pipe that goes kind of up, that's the output from the gas compressors. And we go across the building on over to the other side of the building where our gas turbines are. So pretty much the air comes down through here. And this section in here is where the air is compressed by the turbine. The fuel comes in here, and these are combustors. There's rings of combustors in here. So the air is compressed, and then the combustor, and then it heats it up. And back in here are a number of different sections where is really the turbine section, if you will, where part of it goes to drive the compressed air, and the others go through here. It's got a shaft in between that goes through and goes into the other enclosure, which is where the generator is. So the real power portion is here with the combustion here, but you really have to compress the air coming in, and that's why. But when you really look at what this thing can do, 13.5 megawatts take care of half of our campus, equivalent to 13,500 homes. It really isn't very big. So I told you that there's a shaft that goes through the unit coming back out from the air intake, coming over to the generator, and what you have here is a gearbox, for that basically takes it from there and then gets it to a constant speed depending upon the load with the generator, so you can do the 60 cycle power that you need. So, and it's a pretty massive size gearbox because your speeds are in the, I believe they're in the 15 to 19,000 RPM range of the gas turbine. So there's a lot of gear ratio you have to do right here, and of course depending upon the loads, you're going to have to put more in there, but then again you have to have constant speed for your generator in order to have constant cycle power. Power from the generators then comes into this area here where we basically are in a process in which it comes in, and I'll show you in a minute where the control panel is on that one. But we come in and we distribute some to central plant, and then from here others leave this area heading on out to various substations, and ultimately ties in parallels with the incoming service that currently exists with SDG&E on the other side of Interstate 5. Right here is really the nuts and bolts of it, of the 2 generators, which will show you basically the amps and the voltage. A lot of electronics are involved with this one, so we know exactly where we're at. We also show where we are with our generators, and then tying into the utility SDG&E and where it goes through with the open being green and the red being closed. Obviously we don't have it energized yet, but it will be, and so it can be controlled right from here at this panel if necessary. But we do have some remote areas that are going to be going back into our main control room, where again the operators that are here at plant can go ahead and operate this machine and at different levels, and also to open or close if necessary. But you can kind of see how it's tied into our existing building. We will have the same kind of louvers and glass that the existing building has, so it looks like it's part of the building. And some of the other auxiliary equipment you can see in the opening in there, which are some heat exchangers. We have a small steam generator for regenerating the catalyst on our emissions control system. And so see it right now, but you won't be able to see it in another month. We have a central energy management system. This is the host or the central area with it, and from here we can actually see what's going on 45 of the major buildings here on campus, right down to the thermostat in someone's room. And obviously inherently with it, the exhaust fans. We have alarms if things go off. We can do some diagnostics and checks here. We can stop and start equipment from here in the other buildings. And obviously we have our own chillers and our boilers right now in here. So yeah, this is the heart of the operation for the campus. Right.
The campus has a physical heart. This is it.
Right. Yeah.
Jack, one of your many responsibilities is to come up with budget projections. Considering what we talked about before, the volatility of the current market, how can you do accurate budget and usage projections?
Well, the obvious answer is with a great deal of difficulty, John. The process of projecting utility budgets in this climate is the economic equivalent of predicting the weather. There are a lot of uncertainties with it. Some of the things that we've done, though, to help us with this is to secure a long-term contract. Currently, we have 1 year remaining on a 4-year agreement with Enron Corporation for the campus electrical service. We know what the electrical rates are going to be under that contract. The natural gas agreements that we have right now are with San Diego Gas and Electric, and that part of our requirement is subject to the changing market conditions more so than our agreement with Enron is. And so we are subject to experiencing some volatility, substantial volatility with the natural gas prices. So to mitigate that, we are actively pursuing the opportunities to achieve a long-term, and for us in this market, it may be no more than 1 to 2 years. But to get a long-term agreement for natural gas supply at a quantity that we need with price caps or either floors or ceilings so that we can have some measure of certainty in terms of what our costs are going to be is very important to us. The other thing in terms of addressing the rate aspect and the market aspects of this, the other thing that we can do is to control our demand on campus. Much of the utility tariffs or rates today that are available for a large user such as UC San Diego are linked to the time of day that the energy is used. There are on-peak and off-peak times. So our ability to manage our usage, manage our demand, our loads on campus in relation to the time of day can help in terms of saving on consumption and have major impacts on cost of utilities for the university. Good example of that is our thermal energy storage tank. We have a tank located at the central utility plant that holds about 4.5 million gallons of water. That's connected to our cooling system on campus, our chill water distribution system. So when electric rates are low during the nighttime hours, 10 o'clock, 11, 12, midnight and after, we're able to cool that water in that tank and store it until the next day when electric rates are at their peak, say between 11 a.m. and 2 p.m. We can pipe that cool water, which we chilled the night before at off-peak hours, into our system when the electric rates are very high, and we don't have to operate electrical chillers, which are major energy consumers during that time. So the management on the demand side of our energy use by optimizing the operations in the central utility plant can contribute substantially to our ability to live within the budgets and the financial projections that we've made.
The conservation efforts you're talking about, of course, require cooperation from all corners of the campus, and it must also require a major education initiative on your part.
We have a communication plan that has been developed where We are utilizing the technology, websites, electronic mail, to help us get the message out. We're sharing information in public meetings with the various groups. We've had great support from Chancellor Dines and the campus chancellors, Vice Chancellor's Council to help us and ensure that there's full support from other departments on campus to reduce energy. We're communicating to the campus that anything that a person can turn off or turn down to reduce waste will be beneficial, and particularly so during the times of the stage 3 emergencies that we've had. And I think today is our 27th, 28th day of stage 3 emergencies.
Once the cogeneration plant is up to full capacity, which as I understand will be roughly within 2 years, it'll be operating at 100%, what then?
The growth of the university is probably the umbrella issue that we have to take into consideration in looking at our energy strategy. My sense is that the best thing for us to do is stay the course. We're still driven by a need to have reliable energy services. We still have the responsibility to achieve our energy needs at the lowest possible cost, or certainly at a stable cost that is reasonable for the university. So much of what we have been doing since we began our energy efficiency program back in the mid-'80s will need to be continued. Today we are sending up to our Office of the President in Oakland a project list of about $71 million of additional projects that we feel can be effective in helping us reduce energy here on campus. So I think the combination of doing things in those 4 major components, how we acquire the energy, what happens in the production and use of that energy in our central utility plant, how we distribute that throughout the infrastructure on campus, the use of that energy in the buildings by the faculty, staff, students, and others will all be important to for us to have activity going on in addressing the energy requirements in all those areas.
Do you see alternative sources playing any role in the future, or are they too early in their development to know?
I think the cogeneration certainly is a very substantial alternative. Beyond that, there is a substantial amount of work and development being done with fuel cells. And my sense is that because of the high cost of energy now, that much more interest and more funds will be provided for development of that technology. Beyond that, I think the important thing for us is to ensure that we stay involved and active and continue to support any alternatives that look like they have good application for the university.
So you're keeping an open mind?
Absolutely.
Jack, thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
It's my pleasure, John. Thank you.